Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Ashrafil Anbiya wal Mursaleen. Sayyidina Muhammadi wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd. Fa'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In last week's lesson, we were looking at the topic of divorce and talaq in Islam. And I mentioned the three categories of divorce, and in terms of the wordings and the alfaz, I mentioned that there are two types of divorce, or there are two ways of effecting a divorce or a talaq. The first category is known as sarih, where a husband uses clear, plain, unambiguous words of divorce, such as he says to his wife that I have divorced you, or I have given you talaq. In such a situation, a talaq raj'i occurs. And as I explained in last week's lesson, a talaq raj'i is, in English, is translated as a revocable divorce or a revocable talaq, where within the wife's idda or waiting period, which if she is menstruating of 3 menstruation cycle, a husband is allowed to revoke the divorce and revoke the talaq. And then the second category of talaq and divorce in terms of wordings and alfaz is known as kinaya, where a husband uses ambiguous words of divorce, i.e. he's used words where it can mean divorce, but it can also mean something else as well. And I gave some examples last week that just say if the husband and wife were involved in a heated argument, and the husband says to his wife, ukhruji, that go, or get lost, or go from here, or get out, or these kind of words. So these words, get out, or get lost, or go from here, it has other meanings in terms of the husband may have meant, or go from here, go from this room, or go from my face, or get out of this room, or something like that. But also at the same time, it can mean divorce as well, that when the husband said these words in anger, when he said get out, he could have meant get out of the marriage, or get out of my life in terms of, we've ended here. You go somewhere else, let's part ways. You go and find someone else, I'll go and find somebody else. So if the husband meant that, i.e. he took the second meaning of divorce and talaq, then in that situation, a talaq-e-ba'in occurs. And talaq-e-ba'in in English means an irrevocable divorce, where if the husband uttered these words, and he took the intention of talaq and divorce, the nikah and the marriage will break straight away. Now they could get back together again, but they would have to redo the marriage and redo the nikah. And what I mean by redo the nikah, it has to be from the beginning, like imam or someone would come, they would have to do the ijab and qabul, offer acceptance. There has to be a new set of dowry. Everything has to be like from before with 2 witnesses. They have to do a new set of nikah and a new set of marriage. So this is what we call a talaq-e-ba'in, irrevocable divorce. You can't revoke or take this talaq or divorce back. If you want to get back together again, then you have to redo the nikah and redo the marriage. Now moving along to this week's lesson. Now remember, talaq, or the giving of a talaq, or the issuing of a talaq, is a right of a man, is a right of a husband. Now we look at later that there may be certain situations where a wife is living in a very, very difficult marriage, where the husband is being oppressive or abusive. Then what can a wife do in that particular situation? So we'll touch on words such as khula, or cancelling the marriage, and so on and so forth later. But generally speaking, the issuing of a talaq or a divorce is the exclusive right of a husband and a man. Now why? Why is it the exclusive right of a husband to give his wife talaq? Now the reason why is because the Sharia has acknowledged that men in general are more intellectual or have more wisdom than women. And this is quite clearly mentioned in a hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has described women as naqisatu aqli, which means that they don't have the same intellect as men. Now this hadith which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has mentioned, he mentioned it in a general sense. Obviously, there are situations where some women can be more intellectual than men. Take an example of Aisha radhiyallahu anha, that after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, the main sahabas, the kibar sahabas would come to Aisha radhiyallahu anha to learn hadith from her, to learn like various transcripts, or to learn about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's life, and so on and so forth. But generally speaking, men tend to be more intellectual than women. Men tend to be more wise than women. Now the Sharia has realized that if the option or if the right of talaq was given to a woman, there would have been many divorces and many cancellations and many annulments of marriages. Because women sometimes, in particular, because they get emotionally weak and they tend to get more emotional quicker than men, whenever there is like any kind of petty arguments or any kind of petty issues, the woman or the wife would be very quick to divorce the husband. And this is again quite evidently mentioned in another hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam once said that many of the dwellers of Jahannam, i.e. the fire of hell, would be women. Now why? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then explained, because the women or wives, they tend to be ungrateful to their husbands. And then the hadith goes on to say that, there may be a husband who for many years was looking after his wife, gave her everything, fulfilled the rights which were due upon him. Then whenever there's a kind of argument or some kind of friction, the wife then turns around and says to the husband, "Oh, you didn't look after me, you didn't give me anything at all." So what happens with women is that they tend to be very emotional. Even though you've been loving her for so many years, you've been kind to her, you gave her everything which she wanted, but sometimes what happens is that whenever there's some kind of like issues or some kind of petty issues or problems, she would be very quick to give the divorce or the talaq. Whereas men, again what I'm saying is general, because obviously sometimes men tend to be a bit more quick as well. Sometimes women tend to be, again certain women tend to be a bit more, look at the whole situation, and you get some men who tend to be very quick and they want to like give the talaq and give the divorce. But as I was saying, that generally speaking, men tend to like assess the situation. They look at the pros and the cons of giving the talaq and the divorce. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Sharia, has given the right of talaq and divorce for the husbands and for the men only. I'll explain probably next week or the week after that there are situations where women can actually cancel and annul the marriage, but the actual issuing or the actual giving of the talaq is an exclusive right of a man. And there are many examples in the Holy Quran. Those of you who study Arabic will know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذَا طَلَّقْتُمُ النِّسَاءَ. Now طَلَّقْتُمُ النِّسَاء, the word tum is a pronoun which is referring to men. So Allah says that when you men give talaq or divorce to the wives. In another ayah to Kareema, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَإِن طَلَّقَهَا, which again means طَلَّقَهَا, i.e. if a husband gives divorce to the wives. So from these kind of ayats and ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we can derive that the actual issuing of the talaq and the divorce is a right for the husband and for the men only. Which then takes me on to the next point, and that is that what are the conditions which needs to be found for talaq to be given. So we mentioned that okay, the husband can only give the talaq, but what are the conditions which needs to be found on that particular husband or on that particular man to issue or to give a talaq to his wife? Now there are two main issues. Number one is that the husband who is giving talaq, he has to be mature. He has to be baligh. And you may be thinking to yourself, isn't that obvious? He's going to be baligh, he's going to be mature. Not necessarily so, because as I explained in the nikah and the marriage section, that it's not a condition that a man or even a girl have to have reached the age of puberty for the nikah to be done or for the nikah to be valid. A girl or a boy who are under the age of puberty or maturity, if their guardian was to get them married, then that nikah and that marriage would be valid and would be accepted. And we can see that from the nikah of Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha, that when she got married to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she was only 6 years old. So obviously she wasn't mature, but that nikah was valid. Why? Because Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu conducted a nikah or gave permission to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to marry Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha. So the first condition which needs to be found for a talaq to be effective is that the husband has to be mature. If, say for example, if the boy who has just got married, if he's below the age of puberty, if he's below the age of maturity, then talaq will not occur. So that's the first condition. The second condition, which is quite important, is that the husband who is giving talaq or divorce has to be sane. He has to be aqil. Basically, he has to be mentally there for him to give the divorce and give the talaq. Now, just say for example, if there is a husband who's not basically mentally there, like he's got some kind of problems and so on, he's insane. Sometimes he's a bit like one of those characters, like sometimes he's sane, sometimes he's insane and so on, and he's always like talking garbage and rubbish, and he's just randomly just giving talaq to his wife. So those types of people, if they were to give talaq to their wives, the talaq would not occur. Similarly, another rule which we can derive from here, and a very common question, is regarding talaq in anger. That if a husband was to give talaq in anger to his wife, would the talaq occur or not? Now, first and foremost, one thing which has to be pointed out here, which a lot of people, they always say when they phone me about, oh Mufti Sahib, I've given talaq to my wife, they always say that, oh Mufti Sahib, I was angry. Now obviously talaq is something which is given in an anger state. No one who is happy with his wife, no one who is in a happy, loving relationship with his wife would give talaq to his wife. Obviously, when does a husband think about giving talaq? When does he contemplate about giving talaq to his wife? When he's angry. When, say for example, his wife's not doing something, not listening to him, when the relationship is not what he wanted, then that's when the husband gets frustrated, that's when the husband gets angry, that's when he issues the talaq. So remember, talaq in the state of anger, it's a gimme. When you give talaq to the wife, the husband definitely is going to be angry. Now what the Sharia says is that we need to now differentiate the type of anger. If the anger is such that it is what we call a controllable anger, and then the husband gave this talaq to the wife, then the talaq would occur. Okay? Because obviously everybody here and there, we get sometimes angry, we get a bit frustrated. So, but it's controllable. Like, we're not going to go out and start killing someone. It's not that type of anger. But it's one of those anger which is controllable. We know what we're doing. We're not going to do something silly. We're not going to commit suicide or anything like that. It's within controllable and reasonable anger. Now in that situation, if the husband, having control over his words, was to give talaq to his wife, the talaq would occur. However, if the anger was such that the husband did not have control over the words or what he was doing or what he was saying. It's mentioned in the books of fiqh that if his anger was such that he couldn't differentiate between a man or a woman. What I mean by that is so angry that he couldn't basically his mind kind of blackened out. He didn't know what he was doing. Basically the anger took over his actions, his words, that he then said 3 talaqs to his wife. Then in that situation, scholars have said that if the anger is such which is uncontrollable, akin to insanity, that kind of anger, then talaq will not occur. Okay, so that is what is mentioned in the books of fiqh, like Raddul Muhtar, Fataya Hindi and so on. That anger which reaches the level of insanity in terms of totally no control over his actions and over his words, then such talaq and such divorces would not occur. Now the problem with regards to this particular ruling, which many people now, when they've obviously hear about it or when they know about it, is that they kind of use this anger for their own benefit. So they'll say that, oh, I gave 3 talaqs to my wife. They'll come to the mufti or to the scholar and say, oh, Mufti Sahib or Imam Sahib, I was so angry, I didn't know what I was doing, and I gave 3 talaqs. Now in that situation, the scholar or the imam should be very careful and should not say, okay, 3 talaqs hadn't occurred and you can still live with the wife. Because what happens is that people, as I said, they use this particular ruling for their advantage. Because they'll say that, oh, I've given 3 talaqs to the wife. They do a bit of like Google, research here and there. They'll, find a website and so on, and they'll read this particular ruling, and then they'll say, okay, we'll go to Imam Sahib and we'll just reference this particular, paragraph from Raddul Muhtar or Fatawa Hindiya, and we'll just tell the Imam Sahib, okay, that our nikah is valid and so on. Now in that situation, what should the Imam Sahib or the scholar should do is that he should ask that particular person, do you have any proof or evidence that you do have this kind of anger management problem, that when you do get angry, your anger reaches the level of insanity? In terms of, is this a kind of a medical problem? Does the doctors know about it? Are you seeing any specialists about this particular problem that you've got so, severe anger that it reaches the level of insanity? Now, if that person replies with saying, no, I don't have this kind of problem, then what you should just basically say to him is that basically 3 talaqs, 3 talaqs. You've said it and that's it. Because what happens, a lot of people, they use this, they say, oh, I've got this anger problem. They don't have any anger problem, but when they're given 3 talaqs to the wife, then they start saying, I've got anger problem, I've got this depression, I've got that depression, I've got stress and so on, so that they could still live with their wife. So in that situation, it's very important for the imams or the scholars to be strong and to be firm and to basically say that no, 3 talaqs is 3 talaqs, and that it is impermissible for you to live with your wife. So that's, remember, the ruling with regards to talaqs given in anger, that if it was controllable anger, the talaq would definitely occur. If it's really and truly uncontrollable anger, and in that particular state the husband gave 3 talaqs, the talaqs would not occur. However, it has to be supported by evidence of some kind of medical problem or some other kind of like specialist who is kind of concurring that this person does have anger problem, that when he does get angry, it does reach the level of insanity. Then in that situation, we can say that, okay, 3 talaqs is not 3 talaqs. But if it's not, if he doesn't have any proof or evidence regarding that, then simply we have to say that 3 talaqs is the 3 talaqs, and that it is impermissible for you to live with your wife. So I mentioned 2 conditions which needs to be found for talaq to occur. There, number 1 is that the husband has to be sane, and also number 2, the husband has to be mature. Now there is an exception to this particular rule, and that is that if a husband was to give talaq to his wife in an intoxicated state, the talaq occurs. In the Hanafi fiqh, the talaq occurs. Other schools of thought, they say that talaq doesn't occur, but in the Hanafi fiqh, the talaq does occur. So obviously, the rules were that the husband has to be sane. Now obviously, if he's intoxicated and he's actually insane, then obviously according to the rules I mentioned, talaq should not occur. But in the Hanafi fiqh, if a husband who's drinking, taking alcohol and so on, or even drugs, and in that intoxicated state, if he was to issue a talaq to his wife, the talaq would occur. Okay, this is very important, because the other schools of thought, they say that talaq doesn't occur, and this is where again a lot of Muslim couples do get mixed up here. That as I said, they just do a Google search and they read another fatwa site where it says that talaq given in intoxicating state does not occur and they live together. However, according to the Hanafi fiqh, according to the interpretation of the Quran and the Sunnah of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, is that talaq given in an intoxicated state, that occurs. Okay, it occurs. Now you may be thinking that why does it occur? Very simply, the reason why it occurs is more got to do with zajran wa tawbihan, i.e. as a deterrent, like as a kind of, you say, a punishment in a way. Now why did this person drink alcohol? He's a Muslim, he's not supposed to be drinking alcohol. Now he's drunk alcohol, so in an Islamic state, not only would he get punished in terms of lashed 80 times for drinking alcohol, but on top of that, as a, you could say, another punishment, if he did issue talaq to his wife during that state, even though he didn't have no control over his mind or over his senses, even then the talaq would occur. So it's more like, you could say, as a punishment that is a Muslim, why is he drinking alcohol, why is he taking drugs, then in that situation the talaq and the divorce would occur. However, in the Hanafi fiqh it does say that if somebody becomes intoxicated but through halal ways, in terms of through halal, say, medicines, like sometimes a person taken, say, a bit extra paracetamols or something like that, or a bit extra like tablets here and there. So in that situation, if he kind of like lost his mind, and in that situation, if he was to give talaq to his wife, the talaq would not occur. So that is because of the usul or the principle I mentioned, that talaq has to be given by a sane person. So if he became, how to say, insane through medicine, like paracetamols or other kind of tablets where he's taken a bit extra, and if he was to give talaq to his wife, the talaq would not occur. But if it was done through haram ways, in terms of alcohol, wine or drugs and so on and so forth, then in that situation the talaq would occur. Now the next ruling which we're going to mention here is that talaq is something which doesn't have to be given verbally. Okay, you don't have to give talaq verbally. Say compared to nikah or marriage, where the marriage or the nikah has to be done verbally. So the husband and wife have to do the ijab and the qabul of an acceptance. They actually have to say verbally. Not only would they write it, but they also say verbally of an acceptance verbally as well. Now talaq is something which doesn't have to be done verbally. The husband doesn't have to say to his wife, I have given you talaq, or I have given you divorce, or you get out of the marriage, or you get out, or get lost, these kind of words. He doesn't have to say that verbally. But if the husband was to issue a talaq through writing, then that talaq also occurs as well. So if he wrote on a piece of paper to his wife that I've given you talaq, the talaq would occur. Now let me explain this ruling a bit more in detail, and then we'll just touch on some kind of modern techniques which people use to give talaq in terms of emails, text messages and so on. So would the talaq occur in that particular situation? Now there are two ways, there are two things, there are two categories firstly. The first one in Arabic is called marsuma. And marsuma is a type, is basically where the husband writes on a piece of paper and he addresses the talaq to his wife. So basically marsuma means a talaq which is being attributed or addressed to the wife. So an example of that could be on the paper he writes, O Zainab, I have divorced you. O Zainab, I have given you talaq. Or Aisha, I have given you divorce, and so on and so forth. So that is known as marsuma. And the second category is known as ghair marsuma, where basically the husband just writes the word talaq and he doesn't attribute it to his wife. He just writes the word talaq on a piece of paper, on an email, on the text message, but he doesn't say his wife's name like Aisha talaq to you, or Zainab talaq to you, or Khadija talaq to you. He just says, or he just writes the word talaq down. Now the rule is that when somebody writes the word, just the word talaq on a piece of paper or on a text message or on an email, talaq would only occur if he made the intention of his wife. So if on the text message he wrote talaq, he texted the word talaq, and if he intended his wife, the talaq would occur. If on an email, if he wrote the word talaq, typed the word talaq, so again, the talaq would only occur if he had made the intention of his wife. Again, on a piece of paper, he wrote the word talaq, then talaq would occur if he had made the intention of his wife. With regards to the first category, marsuma, as soon as he writes his wife's name down on the piece of paper or on the email or on the text message that Zainab, I have given you talaq, or Khadija, I have given you talaq, or Aisha, I have given you talaq, then talaq occurs straight away without intention. Okay? So basically what I'm trying to say is that if the word talaq has been written, it will only occur, the talaq would only occur if he had made the intention. And with regards to the first category, where he's actually written his wife's name down and he's written, O Zainab or Khadija, I have given you talaq, talaq would occur straight away. Now, with regards to the second category I mentioned about just writing the word talaq on a text message or on an email. Now, if a husband just wrote the word talaq just on the text message, he just texted the word talaq on the text on his phone, or on the email he typed the word talaq. Now, as I explained, if he didn't make any intention, talaq would not occur. If he made the intention, obviously talaq would occur, but if there was no intention, talaq would not occur. However, if that same email, if he now sends it to his wife, or that text message where he wrote the word talaq, and then he scrolls down and he finds his wife's number and he texts the text to his wife. Now, in that situation, even though the word talaq was just written there, but because now he sent it to his wife, because now he's emailed it to his wife, he's now in a way has addressed it to his wife. So therefore, in that situation, the talaq would occur. Okay, we understood that? Even though it was from the second category, just writing the word talaq, so it was all based on intention. But as soon as he now forwards it to his wife, in terms of emailing it to her, texting it to her, or if it was on a piece of paper, he just wrote the word talaq, but he then told someone to go and give it to his wife. So as soon as the wife takes it or receives it, then in that situation it's now being addressed to her. So that now second category will be akin to the first category in terms of talaq would occur. So that is a ruling when it comes to talaq through writing and through text messages and so on. So what we can derive is that the giving of talaq is in Islam is not just based on the verbal way. Husband, if he wants, he can also give talaq in through writing as well. And one final ruling before we finish this week's lesson is that talaq, remember, when you give talaq, or when a husband gives talaq, it has to be given in a past tense, like I have given you talaq, or one talaq, something in lines with those words. Talaq has to be given. If a husband was to give talaq in a future tense, talaq doesn't occur. So if the husband said to his wife, I am going to give you talaq, I am going to give you talaq, that is not talaq. It's more like a threat. So if the husband was to say, I'm going to give you talaq, or I'm thinking about giving you talaq, or these kind of words, or I'm contemplating about giving talaq, then these words would not actually effect a talaq or a divorce. It has to be, what I'm trying to say, clear words and given in a past tense mode, that I have given you talaq, or in a present tense meaning I have given you talaq, for the talaq to occur. If the husband is saying, I'm going to give you talaq in the future, or I'm going to give you talaq, or these kind of future tense words, then in those situations, talaq and divorce will not occur. We'll leave it there for this week. May Allah give us the tawfiq to what has been said.
I got one question.